Welcome, everyone. So thank you all for coming to Tech Talk Tuesday at Pivotal Labs. So Pivotal Labs, if you don't know, is a software consultancy where we talk about and think about processes for agile software development and do it as well. Okay, so today we're really honored to have Dave speak with us. Dave is a local from Boston, and he is the creator of Font Awesome, and he's going to fill in a lot more about who he is. But Font Awesome is used on a lot of the products that we work on. A lot of our Pivotal designers are super excited about Font Awesome. So when I learned that Dave is actually a local in Boston, I was super excited to get him in here. So welcome, and we're really excited to hear about the story of you and Font Awesome, which is now used on, you said 7% of the internet, which is pretty amazing, and we are contributing to making that more and more so. Good. So thank you and welcome.
Sure, thank you very much. Well, it's nice to meet all of you guys. I will let you throw your password in here. So apologies, this talk is a little bit rushed. I was away for a death in the family last week and didn't have nearly as much time to prep as I would have liked. So I'd love to keep it a little bit informal. Feel free to even interrupt me and ask questions along the way as you have them. But I'll basically kind of be running through several kind of bits of stuff along the way. So I am David Gandy. I am a male underwear supermodel for Dolce & Gabbana in the UK. I am not, but I get email for him all the time. I get overdue Jaguar dealership notices. I get offers from hotels in Sydney to come and stay. Anyway, I get confused with him a lot, quite obviously. So I first came to the area right at 20 years ago this year to start as a freshman at MIT. I was very, very focused on mechanical engineering, product design specifically. And so professionally, I've actually worked in software ever since I graduated, but a real heavy focus on bringing all of the best practices from the physical world, product design, and development into software. So I've been around the area for ages, spent several years at Endeca just up the road. I've worked several summers and years out of the CIC. But I've been around the area for quite a bit of time. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Missouri, and that wouldn't be relevant, except for it's going to be relevant in a little bit when I tell you about some of the folks that I get to work with. But that's me. I am most known for, well, in the software world anyway, for creating Font Awesome. For those of you that don't know, Font Awesome is a super simple set of vector icons that you can put on any website. Super easy to use, and there are a lot of advantages to it. And it was released about 4 years ago. I was working out of the CIC on a different startup, and I was griping to one of my co-founders about icons and how none of them looked similar enough. They were all a pain to use, and it was just way too much effort. And so my co-founder told me to shut up and stop bothering him. And to just make it myself. So that's really what it was. And it was taking several pieces of technology and putting them together from different places into just the right sort of mix that resonated when we released it on Hacker News. It paired very nicely. Bootstrap had just been released just a few months earlier, and that was taking off like crazy. And Font Awesome worked really nicely. It was a simple drop-in replacement, which it was really designed to work with Bootstrap originally. It works with any framework on any website. So that took off well enough. It melted the web server. That's when I discovered GH Pages for serving static pages on GitHub. That was a lifesaver, and we've been using that ever since. In the past year, I think we did about 100 million page views, thanks to GitHub for doing that for free. So thanks to them. But so where we are right now, we started off somewhere around 200-ish icons. It's up to 632. We are the number 7 most starred repository on GitHub. We had been 6 for a long time, but React is kind of badass, so it's understandable. As of this past month, we're on roughly 7.3% of the internet. And if you believe that the internet is a billion websites, that's about 73 million websites, and that is doubled since in the past year. In terms of the open source community, we have 2,600 open issues for new icons. people want lots of icons. And it's sort of the long tail of the project. So many are so very specific and so very tailored to a specific use, or are so hard to actually turn into a concrete object that you can design that they're still sitting there. But there's a big desire for that, and we've got a lot of involvement from the community. So day to day, I met this guy. Kind of he had been sort of taking it upon himself over a year to just answer a lot of issues and be really helpful. So we made it kind of more formal. So Jeremy Tagliatella from Italy manages a lot of the issues day to day because there are so many coming in, and he does a phenomenal job with that. But it's one of the advantages to being able to be remote for a lot of things and work remotely, is that you meet people from all over the place, and tons of people are willing to help. Most recently, where the community came in, 4.6, the most recent release, was very, very heavily centered around web accessibility. That was actually our roots. One of the reasons that I think we were popular is we did accessibility right years ago. The web moved on and things changed. And accessibility changed. And so we recently put a lot of effort into a release around making accessibility as it should be for Awesome specifically, and hopefully a lot of those best practices will make their way into other projects as well. But accessibility is a huge, huge, huge piece of web design. And with a little bit of knowledge, you can help a lot of people that are low vision or they are impaired in some other way to be able to experience the web in a much richer way. So this is the kind of stuff that is really important for all of us web developers. The newest project that we put together is called Awesome CDN. This is different from what Mac CDN had been hosting on the Bootstrap CDN. They're still hosting it all for us, and they are phenomenal. But basically, we're taking CDN for Awesome to the next level. You put in your email address, we send you a unique code for your particular website. And the reason that's helpful is it means that you can upgrade Awesome by going to our interface instead of pushing any code. So you can basically grab the newest interface, hit publish, and go. And we have a couple other new features that are only a part of the CDN that we're doing. One is bringing things up to standards with asynchronous icon loading, the same way that typefaces are loaded asynchronously. Google and Typekit have come together for some very good open source work on that, and we're making use of that. Another thing, which was entirely developed in-house by us, is what we're calling auto accessibility. Accessibility around icons is particularly tricky to sort through and understand. So we've basically simplified it down to where you only need to remember one thing, and we do the rest. So if you're throwing an icon in the middle of a page, you just need to, if it has semantic value and isn't just there for decorative purposes, you throw a title and what it represents semantically in that title, and we take care of everything else with a little bit of JavaScript. So that's all you have to know in order to do icons in your website and be fully accessible for folks on the web. And there was a lot of involvement, again, from the community in this, making sure we were hitting it just right. And it's sort of speaks to the power of open source there. Awesome actually has turned into more than just an open source icon set. A couple of years ago, my childhood best friend of 25 years, who's in Missouri. He and I have been working together for several years. I had gone away to school at MIT, been working in the software world out here, and very quietly, unbeknownst to me, he had become the best software developer that I knew. So figured that out, and about 5 years ago, we've been working together professionally ever since. And 2 years ago, we started Awesome. And Awesome is taking a lot of things that we learned from Awesome. And it's really that there's a real dearth of high quality, easy to use design assets that are out there. And so we are building tools to help, building tools and curating the design assets themselves so that people can come and can easily get something that's gorgeous on their website, that is uniquely them, that doesn't look like everything else that's out there, like Awesome, from one place. So one style in 634 icons isn't actually enough. And so that's kind of the idea behind a lot of this. And we're starting with icons and typefaces. And there's more that's coming with that as well. We're also going to be, so basically the big idea behind it is that it's a centrally managed front-end CDN for design assets. We have worked with there are some phenomenal people out there that are better than me at designing icons. And we've got them on the site. One of my favorite ones out there is Flaticons. It's by a guy named Zach Rosuski. He did all the Airbnb icons as well, but it's a phenomenal set. It's 500 icons. There are 2 different variations on it. It's absolutely gorgeous. But the real advantage here is that the things that you start with when designing a website, you've got your color palette, your typefaces, your icon set, and then you've got a framework maybe you're putting with it or something like that. But those first things, you shouldn't have to spend a really long time figuring out. You should be able to get them, you should be able to move along, and you should be able to serve them up quickly and easily. So, told you a little bit about my co-founder, Travis. He and I grew up together in the same city. Last summer, we applied for Y Combinator, and so that's where we were. We were out in San Francisco last summer. And that was a phenomenal experience. Anybody who ever considers doing it, it's absolutely worth it. For many, many reasons. They made themselves worth it in the first 30-minute meeting we had with them. But super interesting. But you'll notice we're not in San Francisco. We are in Boston. That is on purpose. We raised a round last fall, also from Boston. That's on purpose. There's a lot that we like in the community here, and that we really, really appreciate. And so we're very purposely here and staying here, and very proud to be here. So, one of the big questions that's been looming out there a couple years ago, sorry, this is going to get a little too techie maybe, so we'll see kind of how this goes. No, okay, so Chris Coyier, CSS Tricks, awesome website. It's on my daily read every day. I churn through everything that's on there. Chris Coyier, phenomenal guy, came out with an article called Icon Fonts versus SVG and Cage Match. And basically his conclusion was, he doesn't like icon fonts, he likes SVG. And I can get that and I understand that. So I think each have their pros and cons. So we're going to take a look at both of those. And it's not quite as cut and dry as, or at least in my opinion, as most of the web sort of seems to think that it is. But of course, I come from a different world and I've got my own biases. But so some of the pros of icon fonts, they are super simple to use. You can throw a single line of code on your website. You get access to the whole set. There's no managing resources. There's a single file if you're managing it that you have to deal with. It's all packaged. It's very neat. And the really, really awesome thing about it is that you get full control with CSS. Everything you can do to traditional typefaces with CSS, you do with icon fonts, and they inherit whatever is around them. So they just blend in. They aren't there to take attention. They're there to help guide and to help reinforce things visually. And really, icons, at least for what we're doing in Font Awesome, they're not very complex objects or complex ideas. They're really simple. They're very simple. They're readable at a small size because we're trying to communicate something small. We're not trying to draw attention visually. It's not a traditional graphic where you're actually trying to draw attention with it. We're actually trying to blend in yet reinforce an idea and also an aesthetic at the same time. So that's why I think there's some differences here. But and something else that's happened too is that accessibility has actually gotten, once we started tackling accessibility, we thought there was a whole lot more we had to do around fallbacks for PNGs, specifically for folks with low visibility concerns. And it turns out browsers have gotten much better even in the past just few months on this. And they recognize icon fonts differently from traditional images, and they treat them differently in ways that are great for folks who have low visibility issues. SVG Pros. A lot of really cool stuff on SVG. Animatable, you can take any individual piece in there. You can animate individual sections. There are some bugs that exist around there, but that's a browser thing, and they'll eventually get them ironed out. They're a lot easier to output. If you've ever tried to actually create your own icon font, unless you're using a service that's doing it, like Fort Awesome, they're kind of hard to work with. SVG is relatively transparent, and you can export it, and you're good to go. However, SVG has some issues in that not everyone actually obeys the spec. One of the problems with SVG is that it is human readable. This is actually a problem. It means that people go in and monkey with things that they think are unnecessary because it loads in one browser, and then it gets distributed, and then it doesn't work in other browsers. And there's a lot of issues around SVG. Also, the fact that Adobe doesn't really obey the SVG spec kind of at all. Their implementation is so painful to work with that there are other problems that arise there. But it's weird, like certain things in SVG on Adobe are great, and some of them are atrocious. It's very, very strange. With SVG, you can style individual elements within the icon. So every single piece that's in there, you can style those individually, meaning that you can do multicolor icons, and you can do some other things pretty easily and still be able to control that with CSS. Unfortunately, a lot of browsers have sort of broken pixel perfection for icon sets, for icon fonts over the past year or so. So SVG now wins when it comes to pixel level control in browsers. They're very portable and easy to use in desktop software. It's a little bit more of a pain in the rear end to use Font Awesome for a lot of that kind of stuff. And they're arguably more semantic, a more semantic format for images. And this is where I'm going to differ pretty heavily here. If you step back and you think about what Font Awesome glyphs actually are there for, like I said, they're communicating a single idea in a picture. This is not a new concept for humanity. This has been done for thousands of years. And many languages are pictographic languages. To make that argument that they need to be images would be to make the argument that that kanji needs to be SVG, and it's not okay for it to be in a traditional font container. So I actually think the traditional font container for these types of pictograms are actually a very semantic, very acceptable way to do it. And one of the biggest things I like about things being together in a set is that they are visually cohesive. This was always one of the biggest things with Font Awesome. We wanted things, every icon when it's sitting next to each other, to reinforce the same aesthetic. They're not perfect. They could be better, but they're one of the better sets that are out there. And if you are cobbling together SVGs from different authors and different sources, you're going to have issues with aesthetics, period. Unless you've got somebody there who's massaging them and doing a lot of work to them to get them back where they like them, you're going to have some issues there. Which again, I think is one of the wonderful things about icon fonts, is that it subtly reinforces a brand and subtly gives an aesthetic without even realizing what's going on. It's like a good color palette and like a good typeface. It's one of those tools in the toolbox to do that well. I think they're both great options. They both have their pros and their cons. For Font Awesome 5, we're actually already working on full SVG support. It's been kind of a pain to get the same kind of usability as we get, ease of use as we get with icon fonts. We're not quite there yet with SVG. As soon as we are, then we'll release it. And in the end, I don't think it's as much about the technology that's delivering it as it is the icon set itself. And I think this is where there's a lot of work to be done in the world. There's a wonderful, wonderful curated set called Symbol Set. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those. So symbolset.com has 20 different curated sets by phenomenal designers. And they've got some pretty cool secret sauce in there using ligatures, which helps out with accessibility. And there's a whole bunch of cool stuff. You should check it out. And we actually recently bought them. So we're going to be bringing those sets into Font Awesome as well. But we have a great relationship with so many of the world's this sort of individual pixel level icon design is its own art form. And I personally love it. And it's been so much fun to get to meet so many people around the world doing the same thing and bringing them together and building it into the service. So that's kind of the whole SVG versus icon font kind of where I see it. And so I don't think it's quite a toss-up as it is. There are articles about there that basically are, well, people like to draw attention with their article titles on the web. As in politics, reasoned discussions from different perspectives are less common because they get less page views. Anyway, so that's me, davidgandy.com. Happy to talk through any questions, any specific anything. If you want more of a history about Font Awesome or kind of some of the Easter eggs or any of the other kind of stuff that's in there, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I have a question first. I was wondering, could you talk a little bit about how you guys decided which icons to choose for some of your, like some of the things you communicate can be so much more complex how did you get to the process of, what was the process like of deciding which icons would be those things?
So for the very first version of Font Awesome, Bootstrap had their own icon set. They were raster images, low resolution, single color. So what we did first was, in order to be able to be a simple drop-in replacement for that set, we duplicated all of those icons. So whatever they had, we were going to have at least that many. And from there, in terms of the complexity of the idea, so basically what we say when you're asking for a new icon is concrete is better than abstract. An abstract idea is very hard to turn into something concrete, but an object like a phone or a megaphone or a chair or something like that can represent lots of things to people and tends to work better as an icon. In terms of how we've chosen them, it's a hefty mix of paying attention to the GitHub issues. There are so many brand icons in Font Awesome now because there are so many people that's one of the biggest reasons that they're using Font Awesome is you get the newest Instagram icon that was updated 2 weeks ago. We had a release the next day with the new Instagram icon because we had enough requests and people were really polite about it. That makes a big difference in open source. If you are really, really polite, people are a lot more likely to be like, yes, absolutely, whatever you want. And if you're not, it works the other way too. Yeah. Anyway. The problem with that is that each person coming with a hodgepodge request is that oftentimes you will miss the theme that's going on and the set. So this is actually something that we're going to be rectifying with the next version of Font Awesome is being much more complete about that. So this is one of the tricky things with running an open source project is you have to listen to people and ignore them at the same time. It's a lot of both. And knowing when to kind of stop and bring everything back together into a whole and focus on that for a bit. That's a overly long answer to that question.
So, back when like you got picked up by Hacker News and your web server melted down, and you just like stepped back and went, whoa, right? Like, when did you decide, like, this is something that I'm going to, like, contribute all of my time to? And, at what point did it start to get too big to handle on your own? And, like, how did you navigate that transition? And is that what you were looking for with this project? Or?
I mean, not originally. This was completely a passion project. My set of experiences and skills, I am very visually oriented. There are plenty of visual designers much better than me. I'm also very technically focused. There are people that are much better technically than me. But the intersection for me as an individual is something that doesn't really exist very often. And so this was me playing to my strengths. I'm a firm believer that one of the most important things to do in life is figure out what your unique strengths are, the unique things that that make you up as an individual, and play to them. Spend your whole life. Forget about your weaknesses. Your weaknesses are a waste of time. That focusing on your strengths is going to make the biggest difference. And this project is a direct result of consciously making decisions to put time into those places. And that's kind of where it came up. And in terms of when I knew that it was time to do it on my own, it was when someone told me they would give me cash to work on it, an investor. That's sort of the short answer. And at that point, that was exactly right about 2 years into Font Awesome. It just hit its 4th anniversary a few weeks ago, a couple months ago now. So that it's sort of at that 2-year mark, we were getting, it just continued to expand. I expected it to be, honestly, something like everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame. And I expected it to kind of, stay popular-ish, somebody else to come out and do something better. But nobody's really done much significant in this space. And I think there are a few reasons for that. But one of them, I think, is that the unique set of strengths that we've built at our company now is something that doesn't often exist kind of in one place. I think it's, yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the Instagram icon change, because that was like probably the 3rd thing that went through my head after I saw it. Was like, oh, how fast is Font Awesome going to have a new version of this? And pretty cool that you came out with it. The kind of question that I have is, the metrics that you showed, kind of like 7% of the internet, is that entirely driven by kind of the metrics you have around like the CDN usage, and how much do you believe that that's kind of accurate in terms of the usage, and how do you look at kind of the self-hosted version of this? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so the mechanics of where that number actually comes from is from a source code search engine called MeanPath. The last crawl through, they indexed 172 million websites, the front page of the website. And that's roughly 20% probably of the total that are out there. And in that particular crawl, they found us on 12 point something million sites. So there's a little bit of an extrapolation up to the total number of websites that are out there, but this is a third party counting the number of mentions of Font Awesome in the head of the document, looking for the CSS or the like. And there are lots of it. If somebody has it rolled into their CSS, there's a good chance we're not finding it actually. So the chances of it being more than that are pretty high, but it's so impossible to actually say that. One of the interesting things about us doing more with the CDN is that it means that we get to know more about Font Awesome usage. We'll be able to tell which icons are used more. We'll be able to make recommendations. We'll be able to, we're working on this feature right now that'll report which icons you're actually using, and can also sniff out ways that you're using it that might be, like you might have misspelled an icon, or you just kind of like, you've sort of missed something there. So we're trying to push that CDN as far as we can, and really that kind of becomes the front door into other paid services like Fort Awesome, and so that's kind of the next piece that we're working on there. The CDN has gotten a lot of good traction since we released it 2 weeks ago. We've got about 20,000 people that are using it already, so which is pretty consistent with the numbers we were expecting for it, but yeah. Oh, and it's built, hang on, this is awesome. It's built on the Erlang VM, Elixir, and Phoenix, because we knew we were going to have serious scale issues from the start, and it's phenomenal. I just want to say that we're coming from Rails, and we spent so much time dealing with perf issues on Fort that it's awesome. And so much of the Rails community is moving there from what we've seen. That's been a really nice experience. We spent less time building, so much less time building, because we didn't have to deal with a lot of that kind of stuff. But anyway, yeah.
Probably the only person here who's not a computer programmer or a technologist. Not true. But one thing so this is an open source tool set, and you were mentioning how you have a company and you have investors. How do you have a company?
Yeah.
How do you make income so that the investors can get paid?
Yeah, so the way that we're doing it is building out a commercial CDN specifically focused for designers. A CDN is a content delivery network. This is sort of like a next generation. So Akamai across, I think are they still across the street? Yeah, so Akamai was sort of the first generation, and they're working on a lot of stuff like this too, obviously. But content delivery network puts servers around the globe physically closer to people so that it takes them less time to fetch those assets. And those are becoming commodity in a lot of ways. I think you can go and download CDN in a box and throw it in a box, and all you got to do is physically put the servers in places. So that's becoming a commodity product. So what we're doing is we're focusing specifically on front-end designers and the assets that they're working with, icons, typefaces, images, and also CSS and JavaScript. There's a lot of bloat in CSS and JavaScript because of frameworks. Frameworks are not evil. Frameworks, I think, are phenomenal. If you're getting something done quickly, and who is not trying to get something done as fast as they possibly can, frameworks, it's hard to really argue with frameworks. There's a whole sort of movement. There's a philosophy behind no, everything must be semantic, which basically means that you have lots of CSS and very clean HTML. The opposite end is you have less CSS and kind of dirtier HTML. They're both equal ends to get to the same place, but I think one actually gets you to that end a lot faster. Anyway, that's not your question. I answered something else. Is that answer close enough? So we have a commercial product that's paid, that we have users, that we have traction, and YC helped us a lot out with the business side of that particular thing. But it's a good question. The real question, can an open source project figure out a way to become commercially viable? is a tough question. I mean, Docker's trying to do similar things. There are a lot of people trying to do something like it. jQuery has jQuery Foundation. So they're keeping the lights on and having people work full time purely through donations from large organizations. So we're trying sort of a different tack, but yeah.
So I think I just want to piggyback on the open source question. As a designer, at first when I saw a lot of icons on the web, I wasn't particularly icon font don't always meet my needs. So I often found myself just shopping different icons out there, and a lot of people actually do produce other icon fonts. But what I noticed that the reason why Font Awesome had such a longevity and has been so popular in the past few years, instead of just a boom for a while and then once the trend is gone, it's forgotten. As a user, I definitely feel the open source community has given Font Awesome the kind of life and energy to keep it going. And now you are taking things more commercially. I wonder, have you ever thought, if you brought Font Awesome to the commercial path, 1 year, 2 years earlier, what would happen? And now, as you're making the leap to the more commercial space, how are you planning to balance the open source community
Yeah.
and your own growth?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is there are 2,600 open issues for new icons. Doing that all in our free time, we wouldn't be able to do it. It's just kind of beyond what we would be able to do. So a commercial version that's providing more icons itself is one of the things that's in the works as well for in the next couple of months. So we are going to be doing Font Awesome Pro. It's going to be timed up with Font Awesome 5. But we have a commitment to leaving Font Awesome as it is open source, and to be contributing to it and to not letting it die. It's going to continue to get updates in the exact same way that it is now. But we're going to be doing some additional commercial, because what we found is that when it solves the problem this well, the folks that we talk to in our user interviews and our surveys were very interested in paying to have access to more icons that work the same, that are just as easy to use. So that's one of the pieces that's coming later this year as well. Yeah.
I just want to ask, how long does it take to make an icon? And then also, can you talk more about the user testing you do?
Yeah. So the most recent, we talk to people a lot. We will engage specific people from whether they're coming from the GitHub issues, whether they're Fort Awesome users, because Fort Awesome is so similar to Font Awesome. We get a lot of feedback all the way back into the open source through that. We talk to people a lot. Most recently, we put together a survey that we just asked people to fill out, and it was a long survey. And we had 6,000 people fill it out in less than a week. And so we have a phenomenal open source community. Pardon me. And that's where we're getting a lot of that's kind of how we're feeding a lot of that back through. It's talking to people. Yeah.
But what does a conversation look like?
Conversation, it depends on the issue. So for around the accessibility stuff, we noticed a few folks were especially vocal. We also noticed a few of them with a reputation in the accessibility world. So we pulled together both people with a reputation that we knew about this, and the individuals that we recognized were going to be using it because they lived in that world. So we ended up talking to lots of them offline and making sure we put together a spec. We're like, how does this look? Does it meet these cases? And there's the conversations you can look through on GitHub, kind of all of those sort of pieces along the way. It really varies a lot. Sometimes they're phone conversations. Sometimes they're over GitHub issues. Sometimes it really kind of varies. But and depending on the focus of it, if we're doing more searching, not knowing what we're looking for, just sort of like a blind interview to ask questions, it'll be a little more scripted and a little more sort of branching. But yeah. You asked about how long does it take to do an individual icon. Probably on average about an hour for every icon. There are icons that have taken upwards of 40 hours that I'm still not happy with. So it really depends. There are some there are some shapes that when you design it sort of at a larger size, when you're looking at it, you bring it down to 14 pixels, and it looks like something completely different. And so going through many iterations of the same thing, and also throwing it out to people like, what does this look like to you, kind of a deal, like going back and forth. Some of them I hate the user icon. I despise the Font Awesome user icon. It's never been the shape that I liked. Then on the other hand, the icon that started Font Awesome is actually the retro camera that looks sort of like a Leica. Another one of those intersections between art and technology is photography. I spend a lot of time doing that. And there's something gorgeous, I think, about older cameras, specifically Leica. I don't have the disposable income to be doing much with them, but let me see. There we go. I'll get up a new window. Okay, so there we go. Oops, I should probably use the right domain ending, right? So we recently did actually procure fontawesome.com, and everything will be going over that soon enough. So this is the icon that I spent a lot of time early on getting pixel perfection, getting it still sort of to look enough like a Leica and to have its own personality. This was actually the first icon that we made for Font Awesome, and it only got redesigned for when we were going down, the first, I think it was version 2 we released for pixel perfection. And so that was the only time we edited this one. But there's some that I absolutely love. There's some that have sort of funny little quirks inside them. If you look at somebody, I'd totally forgotten about it. Somebody said that they actually scanned the barcode icon. And it spells out FA. I'd totally forgotten that I had done that. There's a new icon that represents Braille, and it's 2 characters in there, FA. We do enough. We try to throw enough sort of references. You'll also notice while the Instagram icon came out very quickly after Instagram, the new Pied Piper icon was released alongside, which had just been shown a few days before. So we kind of keep up on some of that stuff. We think that, I don't know, we're dorks and nerds. And anyway, yeah, we try to put as much of that into this as we can.
Did you just personally follow all the news about new like logo release, and then you personally just first time heard the news?
Most of what we need to do is just make sure we're paying attention to our Twitter feed, because people will tweet out. I think we probably had 25 tweets about it to us within a day. So that was enough to be like, yeah, all right, let's do that. And we've got the release process streamlined-ish enough, or at least we have a solid enough checklist for things that we don't put out releases and be like, oh shoot, we missed something. So that makes it a lot easier too. But
you mentioned kind of taking investment from the Boston community and coming back to Boston. I assume that was after Y Combinator. What can you kind of compare the different environments that you saw in the NPM?
All right, so I'll tell it from a third-party perspective a little bit. So one of our investors was my college roommate. It's funny how the world works out. My college roommate was one of the 2 founders of Grubhub. I remember when he was starting with it, I was like, wait a minute, you're going to go and collect every menu in the city, then you're going to map where it delivers to? Really? That sounds like a lot of work just to get food delivered from the internet. They did it, and I remember when he was raising his first serious round of like $2.5 million or something like that. I was like, okay, but this is what those early ideas look like at that point. So he was telling me, I was talking to him, and he was like, okay, so just so you know, the whole Y Combinator thing is not viewed the same outside of the Valley. Outside of San Francisco, people view it a little differently. There's a lot of focus on Y Combinator in San Francisco specifically, and Y Combinator is absolutely phenomenal. But there's a lot more people thinking along similar lines in the Valley is one of the things that I've seen. There seems to be a little bit less diversity of thought on some things, And one thing I appreciate about, and you're going to get that. If you're in the tech world, you're going to get the San Francisco view. I appreciate having a different, even the culture is different in Boston. The weather, everything is different. And then that brings a subtly different perspective to how you do everything that you do in life, including how you develop software. There's a grittiness about Boston I sort of appreciate. And so that's am I wandering from the question? What was your question again?
No, I guess also,
Yeah.
like, what was the reaction, from, folks in the Valley when you were kind of...
Yeah, we had great responses from a lot of folks in the Valley. My co-founder and I are both married. We both have kids. My wife actually told me I should do Y Combinator, and she was pregnant all last summer with me gone, taking care of our 1-year-old at the same time by herself. And I'm continuing to wander. We were different people from a lot of people there. We were never really intending on staying in Y Combinator. We went home to see our family every other weekend. We did things kind of differently there. We had several meetings when we were out there, and those were interesting, and we met some phenomenal, great, super interesting people. But in the end, what we were looking for in investors was somebody with more of a Boston mindset. And there are a few phenomenal seed stage investors in Boston. If you know where to look, they're wonderful. It's much like when you get far enough along in your career and you're interviewing for a job, you do more interviewing back the other direction. It's obvious that they want you. It's obvious to them they're going to want you. And it's sort of similar, I think, in the investment world too. It's also similar in dating. There's a whole, it's all kind of similar. And so the more picky you are, the better result you're going to get. I am a terrible fundraiser. I am an outright terrible fundraiser. I say what is on my mind, and I don't varnish it very well. It's just not how I'm wired. It's not how I'm going to be wired. I'm not going to try to be that way. But if you have a solid enough idea, and you have people who can kind of who recognize that early ideas don't sound as fleshed out. If you heard we heard the Airbnb guys talk this summer. If you heard how they described it early on, yeah, it sounded ridiculous. And that's how all of it works. But the truth is of a startup is, you have a unique idea, you've got a unique skill set and a unique perspective on a situation, but ideas are cheap. Your team can uniquely execute better than anybody else in that particular space. And the answer isn't that you know exactly what you're going to do most of the time. It's more you know who you're going to do it for, and you're going to keep at it until the right thing resonates. We're not there yet, but we'll get there. We'll get there, especially because we have such an awesome community behind Font Awesome, and we'll find something that people want. That's YC's big mantra is make something people want. And yeah, I think that's really true.
Awesome. Well,
Cool.
Thank you so much for coming.
Sure.
And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.